Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us. This is the third session of Evolution of the Arts in a Digital World Symposium. I'm Allison Kenny Guardhouse. I'm Vice President of Music and Engagement at the Winspear Center and the Edmonton Symphony Orchestra. It's lovely to see so many participants online, and I've been following the poll that everybody has been filling out, and I'm enjoying seeing the various ways in which you're being playful. And it started out strongly for playing or practicing an instrument, which of course, being a music organization, we love to hear. But it kind of looks like outdoor activities are pulling ahead, and that certainly makes great sense. Keep it up. We would like to give a shout out to the Canada Council of the Arts and the Digital Strategy Fund for their support and funding for this session. Their funding's made it possible to have this offered free to all of you today. We would ask that you consider making a donation if that's possible. We thank you in advance for that, and you can just click on the link in the chat. Our organization really does depend upon the community now more than ever. So thank you for your support. We would also like to thank ARIP for their support as well. Our session today will be taking a look at the exhibit creation process and exploring playful ways to interact with technology. Our presenter today is Evelyn Delgado, Children's Museum Development Consultant. Evelyn has created interactive exhibits at many places, including the Creative Kids Museum at Telespark in Calgary, and that's a science center. She was a planner and developer of the Children's Gallery at Royal Alberta Museum and developer of the Children's Library at the newly renovated Stanley Milner Edmonton Public Library. Evelyn has a true talent for knowing how to get people to play. And I think you'll all agree that playing is one of the best ways humans learn. So Evelyn, it is a delight to welcome you here today, and I'm looking forward to this session, and I'm going to turn it over to you now. Welcome, Evelyn.
Hello, can you hear me okay? I can't see you guys, so except for Allison, thumbs up. All right, thank you so much. We've been planning this for, I think, almost 2 years. It's so exciting that it's finally happening. So yes, let me introduce you to Play Interactives. I've been working in children's museums for a very long time. I don't have control of the presentation. Oh, that's okay, it's coming. So I love children's museums more than anything in life. I started my career wanting to do special education. And in order to do that, I wanted to do art education and then move towards art therapy. But I kind of got stuck in the art part of it and left the therapy behind. But I do have a background in psychology, and I think that is one of the reasons why I ended up doing what I do. So today we're going to go through the importance of play, the importance of the visitor, the subject matter, the institution. We're going to go through prototyping. Then I'm going to give it up to you guys, and we're going to have breakout sessions where I will present you with a design challenge that I had to overcome. Then we're going to come back, and I would love to hear maybe one group from each of the examples to present on how you guys solved this problem. Then I will tell you how I solved it. It might not be the right answer, and maybe you guys came up with better ones, but that's just the way it is. And then I'm going to show you a tour of the exhibits that I have worked on in the past 15, almost 20 years now. This book, Creating Exhibitions, is a little bit, I used it to frame my presentation. It is a perfect book if you're just getting into exhibit design. It's absolutely wonderful. Okay, play. So play is learning. And let's do this like The Sound of Music and start at the very beginning. So these are the first 4 children's museums. They were shaped by the progressive education movement of that time. So this is like 100 years ago, over 100 years ago. At each museum, women played a significant leadership role. Many of these women knew one another and created a new professional network for their particular brand of museum work. And this network still exists today. So the Brooklyn Children's Museum was originally operated under the umbrella of the Brooklyn Institute of Arts and Sciences. Admission was free and focused on natural sciences that supported the public school curriculum, and exhibits were very attractive but simple. The Boston Children's Museum was built by the Boston Science Teachers Bureau and included ethnographic, natural history, and historical collections. The goal of the museum was to invite children to observe accurately and think logically. The Detroit Children's Museum was opened by the Detroit Museum of Art. Its mandate was to support public schools, and its collection was not organized until it was requested by the school teachers. And that sounds a little bit radical, but it kind of still happens today. If a school teacher is going to go visit a children's museum, sometimes if they have something very special that they want the tour to focus on, or their field trip to focus on, then they will call ahead. And when Human Rights Museum actually gotten in a little bit of trouble recently for doing this, but it's common practice. Everybody does it. Then the Children's Museum of Indianapolis by the Indianapolis Progressive Educational Association. They initially lacked the funds to purchase a collection and sought donations from the community. The display of the objects occurred on tables, inviting children to explore further. So overall, these are the things that still happen today. Content is linked to school curriculum, hands-on learning, teacher-run organizations, so they're now run by teachers. There's a lot of teachers who work there, and there's institutional collaboration that still exists today. Next, what is play? So yes, I am starting this presentation with a definition because it is the foundation of everything that we're going to discuss today. The first thing I want to emphasize is the importance of unstructured play. Structured play can be fun and beneficial, but it does not compare to child-led play. Play is important because play is learning. It is not a means to learning, it is learning. Play is the way that children learn, period. Play is also protected by the UN Convention of the Rights of the Child. So if a child can't play, then their human rights are being violated. And I want you to think about that word play and what your idea is of that word. Is it something that you're afraid of? Have you said, like, let's stop playing and let's start learning ever in your life, or with the kids that are in your life? This happens a lot, but let's remember that play is learning. So next, there are many types of play. These are 16 of the most common. You might find more that are better suited to your organization. The first thing to do when designing playful exhibits is to figure out which ones work best for you and to create a play curriculum. Gentle reminder that play is learning. We know that 75% of the brain develops after a baby is born. Play stimulates the brain to make connections between nerve cells. All of these types of play are important as they encourage creativity, fine motor skills, gross motor skills, social skills, executive function. Through play, children are able to control their world and act out different scenarios and solutions. For example, sociodramatic play is when children take events from their real life, such as going to the grocery store, and they may play that game at home. Communication play is when kids take down words, like they'll say a word until it loses all its meaning and just have a full-on giggle fest over that. And that one's really important because it's teaching children, by breaking apart the rules of language, it's reinforcing them. Mastery play. I used to do this a lot when I was little. Just play in my backyard and flood the backyard to create rivers. I mean, it was just a stream, but in my head, it was like this wonderful river. Or I would see ants on the sidewalk and put my finger where they were walking and watch the ants figure out how to go around my finger. And that is fantastic. That is a small child's play, but they're testing the laws of nature around them. So some of this might be a lot for your organization. For example, dramatic play and fantasy play are maybe too similar and could be grouped together in one exhibit. For example, this is one way that I would group them together, just to simplify the types of play. I have grouped all of the role play or fantasy types of play together as they may happen in a theater or in a space for make-believe in your organization. You might also consider having object play where children can reenact moments in history, and those objects might be historical artifacts that they could play with. Or you might want to use all 16. It's up to you and your organization. So, alongside the types of play, we also have the stages of play, and these correspond to the stages of development in children. You want to design exhibits that are developmentally appropriate to the child. For example, an exhibit that involves competition won't make sense in an area for babies who are more comfortable with unoccupied play. Knowing how babies play, whether they kind of chase something and then get distracted with something else, you might want to create a space that is safe for children to do so. Although I am framing these in regards to the stages of child development, they also apply to families visiting together. Families may engage in parallel play with other families until they feel comfortable. Then they might move into associative play with that family. Eventually, hopefully, cooperative play, but not always. So design your exhibits with collaboration and independent play in mind. It is important to consider also the elements of risky play. Children and families come to alternative learning institutions for an experience, and we can help introduce them to dangerous tools or get them to experiment with dangerous elements in a controlled and safe environment. This book, 50 Dangerous Things by Gavin Tully, is a great way to introduce ourselves to the concept of risky play. If you're an anxious adult or if your organization is apprehensive about play, this is a fantastic introduction. He also has a really good TED Talk. So if a book is a little bit too much, although the book is just like, try this, a TED Talk might be great too. So these are some examples of risky play at organizations that I have worked at. So the first one, we see a young child learning how to cut glass. If you look in the background, you see there is no one there. So this probably happened on a weekday. Their backs are to the action, allowing the child to really focus on the activity. The next one is Take It Apart Station, where they use real tools to take apart electronics. Next is an example of pyrography. So I saw one of my colleagues do this at her museum or science center. I think it was in Denver, and I just had to try it. And I learned that it's only possible to do in the month of July around lunchtime because we live so far north. So that was fun to learn. And the last one, the bottom picture, is of a young child drawing on a heat pad. And this is melting the crayon as they draw. So it's not hot enough to burn them, but it's hot enough to melt the crayon. So it's really like, ooh, element of danger. And they'll never forget this one. Maybe they will, but it's really fun to do. Okay, next. So this is an image from Forest School, and they have mapped their space to correspond to all the 16 learning types. Once you have created a play curriculum, this is an important exercise to do to ensure that your space is well balanced. I do this, and then it's a great way to train new staff. But I've never done it in this way. This is a really fun way to do it. Okay, so what does play have to do with brain development? Well, everything. I really like the work of Dr. Dan Siegel and his explanations on the way the brain works. He explains the upstairs brain as being sophisticated and analytical, and this is where learning occurs. The downstairs brain is more primitive or reactive. A child might get stuck in the downstairs brain due to stress or fear. Play lowers stress and helps move children from the downstairs brain to the upstairs brain. So that is a very, very simplistic way of saying it. But play helps the brain be primed for learning. lowers stress, and it's great. And this is a fantastic book if you're a new parent or have little ones in your life. Like, it's amazing. Mhm. Okay, next I'm going to move on to the institution. So, is your institution ready to play? If you are undergoing change in your organization, it is obviously very important to revisit your mission and vision statements and to retrain your whole staff to ensure that everybody is on board. Your mission and vision will need to reflect your new approach. I'm going to show you some of my favorite ones. This is one of my favorite mission statements. It is from the Ghibli Museum. It is a letter of commitment written by Miyazaki himself, and it goes on to describe every aspect of the museum, including the cafe and the store and its commitments to its visitors. And it's wonderful. I do invite you to go to their website and read it because it's quite long, but this is an excerpt from my favorite parts. It's just so great. Next, these two are two other examples. The first one is from Meow Wolf, and it is a very simple message about the power of creativity to change the world. And having seen some of Meow Wolf's work, I do agree with that statement. The next one is from the Exploratorium, and my favorite line is a world where people think for themselves. Also, having visited the Exploratorium, I do agree with that statement. So in a recent study through the Association of Children's Museums, they found that only 57% of children's museums use the word play in their mission statement, and only 31% of children's museums implied it. None of these three examples I showed you included the word play. So what is it about that word that we are avoiding? I don't know. I keep getting invited to talk about play. So I believe in play, but I don't know. What is it about that word? If you have any suggestions, let me know. I still don't know. Okay, so let's move on to the visitor experience. How will visitors play? So John Falk is an expert in museum learning and has written extensively about the museum visitor. For us, let's imagine that these are the players lined up and you have to choose who is on your team. The reality is they are all going to be on your team, but may or may not like the game that you are going to play. So designing the game according to the types of play that we discussed earlier, plus thinking about the players in this way will ensure that you are designing exhibits that will meet the needs of your many visitors. The recharger one is not something we normally see in children's museums. Also, children's museums often have rules about adults visiting on their own. For example, the Manitoba Children's Museum, if you go there alone without children, a staff member will meet you at the front, tour you around, and then leave you again at the door and thank you for your visit. And that's okay, but I did feel recharged when I went. I really love that place. So visitors come to your organization for an experience to fill their intellectual needs and their emotional needs. Their learning in your space is voluntary. They will choose what to play with, what to interact with, and what activities to take part in. Remember, learning will only take place when the cognitive and emotional needs are met, when we are in the upstairs brain. In other words, if play is learning, then they will only play if the experience is fun. So I've talked a lot about the child brain and children learning through play, but children do not come to our spaces alone. The child's parent or caregiver are their first teacher. If the grown-up is engaged, they will facilitate learning for their children. The adult will know what the child knows and what they're interested in, and will make connections to their child's own personal world. We call this scaffold learning. And there are a lot of studies on this. The children will learn better in a museum if their adult caregiver is making connections to their own life. So one of the things that I have learned is that there is a group of children's museum professionals who believe in not having social seating for parents because they want parents to play and engage with their children. And I disagree so much with this because if the exhibits are designed with everyone in mind, they will be inviting on their own. You don't have to force it by putting chairs there that are not anywhere else. If your exhibits are well designed, then you have thought about the spaces where children can develop their own independence and interact or play with other children. Adults can be close enough, but they are also coming to your space for their own needs. And sometimes that means to socialize with other adults. So please, if you remember anything, include social seating in your spaces. So this definition is from FLIGHT, the Early Learning Framework in Alberta. I am highlighting this to remind us that children will bring their whole body and mind to play and learning. Are you ready for what that means? If you make something climbable, they will climb on it. If there is a large open area, they will run. If the space echoes, they will test it. If we see children as if they are full of potential, they will exceed our expectations. So this is the greatest book ever written, in my opinion. This is Haircuts by Children by Darren O'Donnell. And fun fact, he's originally from Edmonton, where I currently live, but he's now in Australia. So this book is an exceptional example of an organization that understands what it means to be co-creators and co-collaborators with children. Remember that play is inclusive. We all take turns. So working with children means going into a social contract that recognizes children are rights holders and should participate in all matters that affect them. Every time I read this book, I just cry. Darren O'Donnell is a philosopher, and he's just amazing. And he's recently started working with children. It wasn't something that he went into, but it's amazing. So if you're worried about what play means and what inviting children in your space is, read this book and it will hopefully change your view on children in spaces. All right, so let's talk about content. Think about how you are conveying the information. Remember the different types of play and the needs of your visitors. How do you honor your passion for the content as well as the needs and wishes of the visitors? If you care, they will care. But regardless of how amazing of a curator you are, this isn't the you museum. If I made museums for visitors like me, this is what it would look like. And that's not everyone's cup of tea. Remember, we design exhibits in service of our visitors. That's really important. How do we do that? Well, exhibit design is about problem solving at its most elemental. So it's problem solving for you as an exhibit designer, and it's a problem solving for your visitors. It is about sparking curiosity and wonder at its most essential. Education is in an informal environment. So again, people get to choose what they're going to take part in. Communication comes in many forms, direct and indirect. Going to the Human Rights Museum, it was such a wonder for me because I got to see, like almost walking through a museum education textbook, all the different ways that they express ideas, and it was wonderful to see. It's about collaboration with stakeholders and influencers. So how is your organization collaborating with the people inside and also with your network of influencers? It is participation by inviting visitors to contribute. And this is a huge one. This is their museum, so they need to be able to participate. And I'm going to show you this in the prototyping section. Most importantly, and I'll say it again, it's in the service of the visitors. So the power of place. Remember, people come to your space for an experience. Think of the space as the third teacher. Create whimsy, create moments of reflection, as well as spaces for wow. Think about little moments and big moments. Remember to have empathy for your smallest visitors and to think about that they might experience the space. Are they in arms? Are they in strollers? And what do they see from that vantage point? Remember that children need transitional spaces, hallways, archways, doors. All of these spaces help focus their attention and prime their brain for new experiences. Do create spaces for reflection, spaces to rest, and spaces to meet. So family-friendly exhibits. Some of these are pretty obvious, but the multi-outcome is my favorite, and I often design, it's basically all I do, is design multi-outcome interactives because they give the visitors the space to play, to think, and to interact with one another. It also offers the organization with the opportunity to document the learning that is happening in that space. If there's multi-outcome, you really, really learn a lot about the visitors because everybody does things a little bit differently while also being influenced from one another. When you're having conversations with young children, isn't it more fun to ask them open-ended questions? I think so. Okay. Look at that, we're all in time. Remember all the spaces outside of exhibits that make up an alternative learning institution. I really like to put sinks on the gallery floor because I love doing art with children. Art develops their fine motor skills. They get to master tool use of all kinds. And I want children to be able to have independence and clean up after themselves. We also want to encourage good hand hygiene, obviously, and the best way to do this is to put the sinks right where the children play. So think about non-spaces like washrooms. Are you going to have family washrooms versus gendered bathrooms? Is it a communal sink with private stalls? Are you going to have stools or bring the sinks down? Is there going to be mini toilets in your space? Are those toilets automatic? Are you going to have water fountains or are water stations better? So all of these things are up to you. And the cafe is a space where there is a lot of stress, and it should be a space where we really come together and talk about our experience. Okay, so let's get going with the prototyping. Prototyping is all about play. So I use the human-centered design method, and this is what it is. So when we prototype, we choose a topic, an object, or a phenomenon that we would like to explore further. Feel comfortable with creating prototypes out of non-precious materials. So this is a huge one. It's really important to use non-precious materials like cardboard and paper and all kinds of recyclables and loose parts. You go through the process of creating exhibits or programs quickly by testing ideas to strengthen the visitor experience. So let's talk about brainstorming. Do any of you guys watch Project Runway? Because I cringe whenever I watch them because none of them know how to brainstorm. So when you brainstorm, your ideas are communal. So you often see things written on Post-it notes on a whiteboard. So once you post it and it goes over there, it is no longer your idea. The screaming louder is not going to help. And that's how they solve problems on Project Runway. You put your ideas out there and then you build on existing ideas. And always give yourself permission to think of at least one impossible idea. You never know where that might lead you. Think about the process to achieve this, like games, challenges, collaborative projects, and talkback walls. And you can do it. You really can. It's not that difficult. Remember, making something out of non-precious materials will help you allow to make corrections as you need. And visitors feel more comfortable exploring with something that is homemade than something that is precious. So here's where we are trying to figure out what exhibit idea might work. But when you make it out of cardboard, visitors will really tell you what they think because they know that it's not precious to you, so they're not protecting your feelings, and that's a huge one. So you don't have to be a maker to succeed at this, but if you need a little help, you can take the human-centered design class for free through Coursera. And I checked it. It started this Monday. So it's not too late to sign up. I'm pretty sure that they're free. I've taken it like 3 times. It's great. Okay, so let's talk about prototypes and some of the things that I've done. So because I live in Northern Alberta, beavers are huge here. So they're one of the major animals in Canada, Northern Alberta. So we wanted to test an exhibit about beaver dams. But a little bit about me, I hate water exhibits. I love the play that happens at water exhibits, but I do not like the maintenance. And if you're working in an organization like a children's museum or a science center, your exhibits team or your maintenance team will be like, okay, a water exhibit's not so big. But if you're working in a different organization where they're not used to the kind of maintenance that a water exhibit might bring, this might be a real nightmare to them. So, however, joke's on me. One of the few COVID safe exhibits are actually water exhibits because of the chlorine. And fun fact, if you are going to bring a water exhibit to your organization, kind of in the past 10 years, exhibits in the States have been moving away to chlorine and using other methods to disinfect the water. Those methods have not been approved in Canada, even though there are a lot of swimming pools, even in the city where I live, that don't use chlorine. They have not been approved for water exhibits. So keep that in mind if you do want to bring a water exhibit, and do keep in mind the amount of maintenance that they require. If you're ready for that, it's great, but some organizations might not be. Anyway, so I wanted to test a beaver dam and have kids play, and instead of water, we used light. In the end, we didn't go with this exhibit because I realized that there are a lot of beaver interactives in Edmonton, so I decided to go with something else. This one is an exhibit about scat and different animals, and it was, can kids pair up, or what kind of conversations would come up from these images? We had the animals and we had the scat, and there was no right answers, and we just let the kids talk. And it was, the conversation usually went to the side. So if you're nervous about prototyping, look how simple this exhibit is. It's literally a table with printouts and a piece of tape on it. So it can be very, very simple. And the conversations that happened here from the kids were amazing. This is another extremely simple exhibit where we just had some different kinds of skulls on the tables and some mirrors. And without any prompts, the kids did this themselves. So here they are checking out their teeth, counting the teeth on the skull and counting their own teeth. It was great. Working at a natural history museum, we knew that having dig pits was going to be a major part of the learning that was going to happen there. And I contacted almost every organization in North America that has a dig pit, and I wanted to see what substrate worked the best. We also wanted to test different substrates and see how kids interacted. So here we have one that's, it's quite big, the kids could sit in it. Paper, and then some fake grass. And then in the little ones, because the substrates were smaller, we used rubber pellets, and the other one is like a, I think it's corn. So it's a kind of corn husk that's all been grated, and they usually use it in gerbil cages. And then the last one is fake flowers and petals. So that was really fun, and we got to bring those around the city, and it was great. Learned a lot. This interactive was about mountain goats. I think I still don't remember which is a mountain goat and which are not. I think it had something to do with the horns. I can't remember, but it was about getting kids to test out their balance. And when we first printed these out, the rocks that we used was the same. It was almost identical to the carpet. So we had to put these other green things. In the end, it didn't really work because I think the colors in the ground were too similar, but it was really fun to see. How do I know it didn't work? The kids started using those circles to play a different game. So they weren't really interested in this. They were interested in more of a memory game, which led towards a memory exhibit, which was wonderful. So if you're thinking, wow, Evelyn, you're so smart and you're full of great ideas, how do you do it? Let me tell you, it's not that hard. Look up the word coyote in Wikipedia, and the first fact that you will see is how high coyotes jump. Is basically how we came up with it. I couldn't believe it, so I went and asked some of the natural history curators if that was actually true, and it is. So we made an exhibit, tested this exhibit about, can you jump as high as a coyote? And then about halfway through is how much, a hare? Can you jump as high as a hare? And coyotes jump really high. So we had parents do this, and a lot of parents were cheating. So it was really fun. I really like that exhibit. This one was about different types of spiders, webs. There's some tunnel spiders that I didn't know about, and some of the ones that we see usually where it's flat and geometric. So this exhibit was like, can you make a spider web? And this actually turned into a real exhibit, which was pretty fun. I really like it. It's very simple, but there's a lot of collaboration that happens, and it's artistic, and you use your fine motors. This is my favorite exhibit of all time. So this is a game that we play a lot in elementary school. I think I played it the first time when I was in grade 7, where you have an object or a picture and you describe it to the other person and they can't see what you're describing, and then they either draw it or, it's kind of like guess who. And the amount of talking that happened in here, in comparison to just having these exhibits out and the kids would be like, oh, okay, that's this, this, and this, and then they move on. We counted it. It was about 30-second engagement per object. But now, when they had to describe the object to the other person without saying what the object was, but just describing the texture, we saw the engagement time run about 45 minutes. It was wonderful. And that's for one object. So imagine the whole table worth of objects. So this became an exhibit, and I really like changing up the type of engagement that happens in a single exhibit. So the exhibit, you can either have objects under glass, or you can take the plexiglass out, kind of like what these kids were doing. It turned out really great. This one was also really fun. We wanted to think about grouse. Kind of like a chicken and a turkey mixed together, kind of. Oh my gosh. Anyways, they do this mating dance. So we wanted to see if kids would be interested or kids and families would be interested in replicated. So we tried different things. We gave them this tail that makes a lot of noise. It's just paper when you open it and close it. And we tested with a video. So can you replicate the dance from the video? Or we didn't have the video. We just had footprints on the ground and a certain interval said like, now turn around, now hop 3 times. It was really, really fun. It was fun to see. Okay, so I'm getting tired of talking, and that is all I'm gonna say. Oh no, one more. So I love talkback walls. This is my favorite thing. So you ask your visitors a question and then they will answer it. And putting them on a tree is really special. I really like the idea of wish trees or a giant idea wall like this one. So here we were testing. This was when I first started at the Natural History Museum. First of all, it was in a city that I hadn't very rarely gone into, so I didn't know anything about the space, the landscape, the lights, like how late it is in the summer. I didn't know any of that. So I asked children to tell me about their city. And this is when I created the backbone for the whole gallery, actually, eventually. Whew. Okay, that's your time to play. I'm going to introduce 4 different design challenges, and these were actual challenges that I had to fix. Because sometimes you put an exhibit out on the floor and it doesn't work the way that you had planned. So things happen. A children's museum is never ever finished, because if you're actually listening to your visitors, you are constantly learning. Also, children grow up really quickly. So 3 to 5 years, you should change at least one thing in your gallery. So this is the first one. This exhibit was about testing the speed of different objects. Children were able to change the angle of the incline with a wheel, and there were lots of objects to test, mostly hockey pucks, because they would go down and then when they would fall down, they wouldn't slide anymore, so they were good. The problem was the objects bounced out of the catch area, and it wasn't a lot of fun. The kids rolled it down and then it was like, boop, and then that's it. Like, it wasn't very fun. So what would you do to fix it? The second one, this exhibit was about the exploration of the prairie landscape, replicating the hoodoos and caves of central Alberta. The problem was that the play in this space was so loud that it disturbed the classes on the other side of the wall. So if you see the cave kind of in the back, I'm pointing it, but you guys can't see what I'm pointing, but if you can with this cursor. So the cave has 2 openings, and kind of in the middle where they meet, there is a hidey hole there. So it's like another little tiny cave. So the kids would hide in there. And then when their friend would go in, they would scream and scare them. So much fun. It's too loud for the space. So what would you do to fix it? Next, so there is a hiding spot in this area of the climber. All the way down, goes all the way to the wall. And then at the very back for the whole thing, there is a spider climber. So it's elastic bands kind of tied like this, and the kids can climb all the way to the 3rd floor. And if they get really narrow, they can fall all the way down. The play in this area was a very loud and high energy. It was kind of rough play, and it required a staff member to be present, and that was not always possible. So what would you do to fix it? For number 3. Oh, and the latest one was something that we had to solve a few months ago. So the entryway into the children's library should welcome children and their families while also being playful. Visitors to the space rushed through the hallway, not really knowing what was at the end of it. And we really wanted people to kind of stop in this transitional space, but it didn't feel like that. So what would you do to fix it? Okay, so I think now we're going to break off into groups. And when you come back, I think we're going to hear from one of each. Oh, if you have been to the spaces and you know the answer, like just ignore it, because that's not fun. Think of your own answer, and I would love to hear them, because I don't know if I was right.
Okay, so Evelyn, you have presented these design challenges, and I believe that we are going to be sending people off into breakout groups. When you are put into a breakout group, everybody, you will be told whether you're in group 1, 2, 3, or 4. And we have multiple groups, so 1A, B, C, D, group 2, A, B, C, D, etc. So you have about 5 or so people in your group to discuss the design challenge with. We don't have enough time for all 16 or so groups to report back. So I am arbitrarily appointing anyone who is in a group with a C on it. Your group is going to share your solution to the problem when you come back. So please make a point when you get organized in your group to appoint someone to be ready to speak. So that is if you are in a group that has C attached to it, 1C, 2C, etc. Zoom is going to automatically divide you into your breakout rooms, and you're going to see in a moment a box appear asking you to move to the breakout room. Please accept. Then once you're in your breakout rooms, turn on your cameras and unmute yourselves, introduce yourselves, and get to work on solving that design problem. You'll have a warning about 1 minute before we close the rooms. And if you need assistance, just request support from your breakout room. The challenges were described in your attendee packages that were emailed to you. And we've also put a link to the attendee package in chat. So if you get in your room, you can't remember the challenge, you'll be able to find a description of the challenge in the attendee packet. So I'm going to wave you all away. See you shortly. About 10 minutes, we'll be back. Well, hello, we're all back, I hope, from our breakout groups, and looking forward to hearing what you were able to solve. Let's start with the first puzzle design challenge, challenge number 1. And can I call upon group 1C and whoever their spokesperson is to tell us a little bit about what you came up with for design challenge number 1.
Hi, Elsa, it's Eric here. I've been designated the spokesperson for 1C.
Okay.
So we had the challenge of figuring out how to fix the problem with the exhibit with the objects falling out of the catchment area. So we came up with a bunch of different ideas. One idea was to extend the landing area so that the objects went further, and then maybe make the material of that landing area a chalkboard so kids could mark where their objects stopped after it ran down each different surface. We also thought about making the landing area like the pool tables in the old pool halls, where once the ball went down the hole, it would return back to one end of the table, so all the balls would collect in one place. So maybe the catchment area would just return all the objects that went down back to the start point of the exhibit. So those were the two main ideas we came up with regards to keeping the objects all within the exhibit and not flying all over the floor.
Very cool. Evelyn, do you want to comment? Evelyn, we don't hear you. Can you unmute?
There we go. Yeah, my little
Okay,
icon
good.
that has the microphone is gone. I don't know where it went. Anyways, yes, so you guys, I mean, there is no right answer, but we did extend, and I'm not going to show you the picture right now. I'll show it to you when everybody gets a chance, because I don't know what order they're in. But yes, we did extend the landing area, and we created a flap. So it created the landing area and then had a flap over it so that the kids could use some of the big hollow blocks to create bumps along the track. So that worked. So good job, guys. I really like your ideas. Those were way better and more thoughtful.
right.
But we were like, had to be quick.
Great. Okay, and group 2, do we have a spokesperson from 2C, group 2C?
That's me. That's the cave one, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So we kind of divided the problem into like sort of structural design and activity design, and also environmental design. So our solutions were to maybe put soundproofing either in the wall or surround, or actually inside the cave, there could be sound reducing structures like foam egg card on the top to make it look like stalactites, or even carpeting to sort of like dull the sound. Also, we had the idea that we could sort of change the shape of the space so it wouldn't be, people who would be able to really run through it, to sort of make it not really tenable for that specific activity. Another idea for changing the environment was to put sounds in the cave already, so the kids would sort of stop and listen to those sounds specifically, instead of making their own. We'd have to test that. And another one would be, the other part would be sort of activity design, which might need a person. So you'd have an activity in that space, which would involve being quiet and not disturbing whatever animal is in there, perhaps. I keep coming up with new ones as I'm talking about it, but yeah, that was our, we're really curious about what the solution actually was.
Okay. I don't know, Evelyn, if you're going to share the solution now or later.
Okay, might as well. So you guys were right. Okay, so this is the slide one, but I'll come back to that. So this is what we did. We took away the slide because it was like, oh my gosh, kids think that this space is a playground. So let's take away the slide. Maybe that will work. Then we added these texture poles to change the exhibit in here. So the ones on the right had footprints and textures that you might find in central Alberta. And then the ones on the left were more about like things that we might feel. And however, that didn't work because the cave's still there, and that was where the problem is. So we did the second thing that you suggested, was when there was a classroom happening, and I don't know if you can see here, if you can see my cursor, but this wall doesn't go all the way up. So it's like sometimes the kids would actually throw things and land while we're teaching. It's really funny. So what we also did was when there was a classroom happening on the other side, then there was a drop-in program happening here. So you guys were right. We could have added all that stuff to the cave, but this Creative Kids Museum was only going to be there for about 5 years, so I had to make minimal changes. But good job, I love those answers.
Great, thank you. Group 3C, could we have a spokesperson from 3C?
Hi, how's everybody doing? So I think we were kind of on the same page as the last group in a lot of ways. And not really getting to see the full structure. One of the things we had talked about was, and not wanting to limit the risky play that we were talking about earlier, was to add more soft surfaces around the netting. So allowing kids to still climb, but there's that, it lessens any potential risks. And adding some soft pillows and like a more of a chill out zone inside the cave. So creating like a really quiet space, also using things like soundscapes to refocus energy so that it kind of brings the volume and the energy down as they enter that space. And then, I mean, it could be things like designating staff, like you said in the last one, not programming it during certain times or offering programming so that it's not used if volume's an issue. And then also not seeing the space. The other thing we had talked about was maybe turning the structure so that the hidden spaces were more visible. And some of the onus on that sort of risky play is put back on the parents to monitor as opposed to designating to staff.
Good ideas. And Evelyn, what do you think?
Oh, that's great. So yeah, we came up with the same thing actually. So it's impossible to move it. You can't. It was built onto the wall. It was huge. So what we did was we added motion censored lights and a soundscape in this space. And it was almost initial. The way that the mood lighting changed the space, then the activity, the children's energy just came down. It was really about like, oh, this really special place that we come in here, instead of, oh my God, look at this place. So you guys are right, changing the atmosphere just did it. And it's actually one of the kids' favorite places because adults can walk to here, but from the other side, adults never crawl down there. So that's a kids only space. And it worked. So good job.
Good stuff. All right, and group 4C, do we have a spokesperson from 4C?
Hi, I'm Sherry, and we are 4C. We had to make a couple of assumptions. First assumption we made is that there is something behind all of those portals that people are supposed to stop and look at. And the second assumption that we made is that the tables along the left-hand side are just there for storage. So one of the first things we wanted to do was move those tables because, for one, if the portals are somewhere that people have to stop and look through, the tables became a fire hazard and they were unappealing. We wanted to get rid of them, maybe put some colorful benches in there if people wanted to stop and look through the portals. We also said that the floor is very boring and we wanted to put some images or graphics or color or even technical lights or whatever on the floor to draw people to that space. One of the people in our groups thought of perhaps putting tablets or electronics on the wall to tell a story of what's happening in each of those portals. There may be, you can't see it in the picture in front of us, but the other wall is blank as well, and maybe some color on that wall would draw people in, make this a space in itself. But really we wanted to create something right here where people went, wow, I need to stop. I need to see what's happening here now before going to the end, which looks really appealing. You needed something to draw them to stop. So.
Great ideas. Evelyn.
Myself. Oh, am I muted? Okay. I don't know what happened to my little mute. So you guys, that was fantastic. And I'm sorry that I didn't explain this space. So it is a hallway. So this is how we solve the problem. So it's a hallway. On the other side, it's all of the computers that the kids use for homework help. There's also a gaming station. So you can look through the portals, but it's not necessary. So what we did is we commissioned an artist, and he's a local artist. His name is Ricardo Copado. So if you have any projects in Northern Alberta, he's amazing. So he created this mural. He's a painter, not a muralist, but we hired him to make a mural. And what did we get? Paintings. We got like 250 different paintings or something like that. 135, I don't know. And it's just such a beautiful mural. It tells the story of Canada from left to right, from east to west, or the other way around. Yes, like that. And it also tells the story of the day. So it goes from morning to night and summer to winter. So it's amazing. And I mean, we didn't know about COVID when we were designing this space, but now this is this place where people line up in order, because we have to limit the numbers going into the children's library. So this is actually where people line up. And those tables that you saw was the artist getting ready to paint. So they're not there. There's actually where you pick up your holds. So if you have any holds, you would come into the space. So because of COVID, people line up here. So in addition to the mural, the staff created a interactive scavenger hunt to help kids really spend time with the exhibit. And the lights on the ground, like amazing. But this place, I mean, it's a library and it's so bright. Like if you see these lights, they were part of the building. So this, unlike any of the other spaces that I worked at, things were almost already built. So it was from the walls out, whereas all the other spaces, I got to say where the walls went. So these lights were there and we can't move it. So it's not the most ideal space for a light showing art, but that's what we ended up with. I did want to put lights on the ground for sure. And like it was, everybody was on board, but it came to a matter of cost. So good job, you guys. Those were great, great, great suggestions.
Thank you,
So
Evelyn. That was great. And I love just hearing Evelyn describe all of these challenges. And thank you to the groups who were sharing their thinking. And Evelyn, I'm going to let you finish your presentation. And I think we want to leave some time for questions. So I'm hoping that you will be able to wrap it up in about 3-4 minutes, and then we'll open for questions. I know people are going to want to ask you things.
Okay.
I'm going to just step off.
So what I was going to do now is spend the last half an hour touring you through exhibits that I have worked at. But if we have 3 minutes, let's make this a lightning round. So the first place second children's museum that I worked at is the Telus Spark, the Creative Kids Museum. So it's the children's gallery at Telus Park. But although the Science Center is a space for science, the Children's Museum was an art-based children's museum. And to me, art is science. Through science, you experiment with all of the things that you would in science. So it's an art-based children's museum in a science center. So the first thing that you see when you come in, I really like doing talkback walls and wish trees. So we have a wish tree that greets you when you come in. If you see behind these people, I call those a sculpture pit. And my challenge to the designers was I would like a sculpture pit that I can move, that the walls get bigger, and that the periphery is wide enough that parents can sit at. So they did. It's amazing. I love sculpture pits, and I will do them at every organization that I work at. This is an magnet table. So kids make sculptures with magnetic surfaces this big. And so sorry, some of these pictures are blurry, but I stole them from Instagram, some of them. This is a wind exhibit. So we tested different ways, like would kids like automatic or would they like to pump the air themselves? And we found that it was 50-50. So that's what we did. This was really fun. This is just a reading corner, so kind of a quieter area in the bigger area. We put these big boys out. They did not work. The kids would jump on the benches and then try to land on the big boys. So that was a bad idea, but we took the big boys away and then it still works as a reading space. So this is the climber, different angle. We designed it so that you wouldn't have to take off your shoes, but kids took off their shoes. So then we had to add these shoe cubbies in. We designed it so that if the kids went up to the one space and they couldn't get there on their own, then they shouldn't continue playing on the rest of the climber, because then they will get stuck and will need help getting down. But parents would help their kids where they could off of the first step, and then the kids would get stuck. So then we added, I don't know if you can see it right here, but it was a height chart that tells kids, like, if it will be fun if you're from this height to this height. And it's something that they look forward to once they are old enough tall enough to stay in there. I always like I said, mentioned before, a large open area to experiment, to create art, and to make things that are huge. I actually went into art education because of Owl TV, and at the end of Owl TV, they always did a large installation work. And so having a space to do that is really great. So you can have all sorts of programming. Here, these adults for adult nights are dissecting a cow heart. That's pretty cool. Sometimes we'll just paint right on the windows, and that's okay too. There, I like having a space where I can control light. So this is in the theater, and there's black lights in it. So we took the theater, sometimes we do black light painting. One of my favorite exhibits in the theater is there's a joystick that operates the spotlight, and it's such a simple exhibit, and it just works so great. Here's a water exhibit that I can't stand. Now, the water exhibit's really fun, and kids do play a lot in it, and it's like the highlight. And I like how it's like in the center, almost like a savanna, and all of the children come to the center to play in the water. But the amount of maintenance that it takes, it's just, for me personally, I don't think it's worth it. I would rather work in a place that already has water, like a swimming pool, and create interactives there than bring them here. Also, we have to think about water. Not everybody in our neighboring towns has access to clean water, so it just feels like it's not my favorite thing to do. But look how much fun they're having. So I don't know. Here is a paint wall where the kids paint with water, and that works really well because it dries really quickly. I like having a toddler space, a space just for toddlers away from the older kids. So we have it 3 and under. And yes, we do encourage, we actually ask everyone to take off their shoes. We have little booties if people don't want to take off their shoes. Some grandparents need their shoes for mobility, so we'll have little booties on hand that they could put over them. I love using light tables. Then you have a light table that focuses children's attention, and you can put anything you want on there. Oh, this is one of my favorite exhibits. It's a drum machine, and this is Clifford Wagner, and he's the one that built it. So it works just like GarageBand, where you set the thing and then it comes this way. So you turn on the drums, and then there's the one that reads the drums and plays them. So it's analog. It's amazing. Here's a water panel. This is my cousin Bobby. Throughout the space, I have spaces to show off children's art and children's learning. So if you integrate them in your space, then it's more likely that the staff will do them. So this is what the space looks like. This is that sculpture pit that I told you about. Adding a lot of whimsy, all of these knobs in the storage spaces, except the kids will pull the knobs until they break off because they think they can open the door. So make doors that are openable. Another view of the sculpture pits, more light tables. This green space in the back was supposed to be my office, but it was too cold and too loud, and I didn't have any other adults to talk with, so all my other workers were all together in the spaces up there. So we turned it into a sensory space, and it's great. Here's another view of the sculpture area, the air lab again. Okay, so let's move to the children's the Railroad Museum, and I'll work for this one just as fast. I know I'm like over, but I will take me 1 minute. So as soon as you come in, again, the space where you can leave your mark. So we have this wish archway, and there's lots of whimsy in here. So we were able to put a whole car up on the roof, and these giant leaves that represent all the colors of the year. We programmed the ground. Thank goodness I was allowed to do that. There's a giant sculpture pit over here and a light table, because light tables bring people together. And back here, I don't know if you can see my cursor, hopefully you can, is that exhibit that I talked to you about where you interact with the artifacts. Here is a dig pit. So this red stuff, you can lift those up, and kids can play with the substrates underneath, or you can close them up if you wanted to, and you could fill the space with a larger substrate, such as paper that I showed you before. This is a light air exhibit. Remember how we had the pumps in the Creative Kids Museum? I didn't feel like that was the best, and I really, part of my career was to solve that problem. So here we did the pumps on the chair, so the kids bounce on the chair, and that creates the air pressure to move. So I feel like that is finished in my career. I solved that problem. Here is a different way to represent a toddler space. Lots of fun in here. Because it's a natural history museum, there's lots of space for artifacts, and then artifacts that the kids can touch. Here is about transportation. There are some spaces to sit and to ponder. Here is the art space. There is lots of historical photographs throughout the space because it tells the story of Alberta. This is my favorite digital exhibit, and I mean, I don't know how they're handling now due to COVID. Don't think it's been working. in all of the children's museums that I heard, most of the ones that they use are things that you can throw away or the water exhibits. But this one is a projection that does a topographical map on a sandy surface. So as children play with the sand, the topography of the map changes. And there's also programmed like animals and dinosaurs that appear. So as far before COVID, if you'd asked me what is your favorite digital exhibit for kids, it's this one. Now I'm not so sure, but I'm always feel about like cleaning the children and not the exhibit. So another reason why I like putting sinks on the ground, but you also have to be very careful about the language that you're using with children. At first, when the pandemic hit, children were like described as being macro super spreaders, and so it's like now children's view of themselves is like you're this germ-filled thing, and that's not right. So we need to change our wording around children. But anyways, this is the floor lifted up so that you can see the substrate. Here is about all of the grains that we grow in Alberta, so you can get nice and close, and they've been translated into French, English, and Cree with images of the actual stuff. So another lots of things to touch, and the programming on the ground. Lots of light tables, which I absolutely love. This is a theater space, and then historical images of Chautauquas through history that came to visit Alberta. It's one way that you might see it. And then a gallery space within this space because it's what they do. Okay, and that's it. I'm gonna skip all of these ones because we don't have time for these. And I'm going to say, thank you so much for letting me speak today and for sharing your ideas.
Evelyn, thank you. And I think that we will have some questions. I'm going to welcome Anne-Marie Switzer onto the screen here, and she's monitoring questions in the chat. So please start putting them in. And Evelyn, I have to say, just seeing all of the pictures now of the museum reminds me of my first visit there at the Royal Alberta Museum and walking into the children's area and watching parents and children engage together in learning. And I'm thinking that really spoke to me of when you talked about multi-outcomes. I saw living proof of that. And actually, I want to go back now that I've heard your descriptions and have a visit again with the children's area. It's always amazing to me when there's someone who designs something that is able to captivate both adult and child in an equally fun way. Anne-Marie, do you have any questions that have come in for Evelyn?
Our chat currently is a little bit quiet, but I'm sure people are just typing. I was curious though, there was some comments earlier on in your presentation, Evelyn, regarding the upstairs and downstairs brain from the book that you were describing. Could you expand on that and some of your thoughts and how it's shaped what you've done in your work?
Oh, it's so complicated. We could spend thousands of hours talking about the child brain. So what we really want to lower in children is the stress. Good stress is great. That's why we play peekaboo or we go into a haunted house. Kids love that positive stress, and being able to overcome the positive stress is great. But coming into a museum environment, it's so loud. There's so many people there. You don't know what's happening. Your parents might be stressed because traffic was really bad. It was hard to find parking. So you really want to lower that stress and bring children into the analytical brain. And one example of this, I don't know if you guys have seen it, but it's a YouTube video of a dad and he's holding his daughter and she's crying. And in order to bring her from that emotional brain to the upstairs brain, she's crying, he's holding him, she's fine. He's made sure that she's not hurt or anything. She's just having an emotional event. So he says, "Sweetheart, it's my turn now." And so he starts crying. And then he stops and says, "Okay, it's your turn." And she's just like, "What?" Like he stopped her emotional brain, took her upstairs, and she's thinking about it. And so she's like, "Well, I still have this emotional feeling, so I'm going to cry one more time." And he lets her. And then he's like, "Okay, it's my turn." And then he cries, lets her cry. And she's like, "No, I'm done. So he took that event from an emotional event from your downstairs brain and he brought it up to the analytical brain. And that's kind of how we want children to learn at these spaces. You don't want people to feel dumb. You don't want people to feel stressed. You want to take care of their emotional needs when they come into your space. So I hope that kind of explains it. I do watch his, he has a TED Talk that might be beneficial. Also, he's on the Alanis Morissette podcast, which is fantastic. And they spend an hour, and Alanis is very like, wait, can you explain that again? So it's a great way to get introduced to his theories.
That's a really great way of describing that. Thanks for the deeper dive into that. There's a question in our chat about how do you anticipate COVID will influence the change in your approach to spaces like this?
I am very worried because I believe that the skin is your largest organ. We need to touch everything. And as children, it's very, very important that we touch. So one of the ways right now that we're dealing with it is we will lower the numbers. So obviously you can only have X number of people and they will play with an exhibit and then you have to disinfect it and allow another family to come in. I am really hoping, I mean, I myself, I'm taking a 24-month break. I'm going to go back to school, stay in my room and not go out until we are all vaccinated because kids learn with their hands and the virus actually lives on your skin for up to 6 hours. So it's like, oh my gosh, I hope that we like practice what we preach, which is always like, you're in a new space, let's wash our hands just because that's the right thing to do. Let's play. And now we're going to somewhere else. So let's wash our hands again. And maybe it'll get people to wash their hands before they eat. Because really, isn't it about getting the virus inside, like your inside? So it's either you touch your eyes or your face. But I really hope that this vaccine will cure it because it's just way too scary to think of a space where children play and they're not allowed to touch things. It's just too scary to think about.
Well, thank you for that. And I think we're all hoping the same thing as you. Real quick, we'll take this one last question, Evelyn. And someone is interested in your curatorial process. So for instance, the universal design or having protocols on cultural influences.
Yeah, definitely. So this is where the collaboration happens. I don't know the needs of my community by myself alone. I may know the kids' needs, but not all of the kids in the community. So for the Royal Alberta Museum, we had experts on board. We had somebody who was an advocate for kids with special needs. And so it's just like, make your team as big as you can and speak to them regularly. So you have a team that will speak for each group and go and talk to those specific groups. One of the things that always 100% of the time, it's like, oh, this table is not wheelchair accessible. And then I went and talked to kids who have wheelchairs and all of the wheelchairs are different heights. So changing the table is not making that exhibit or that approach accessible to everybody. It's really about how can we accommodate this space. And if you have kids that visit, bring them into the gallery when it's just one-on-one, or bring schools with special needs kids and tell them, how is this space working out for you and how can we change it? There could be small changes that you make group to group, and the cultural one is super important as well. So you have these cultural groups come to when we studied in Calgary, we were thinking about the language that we were going to use, and English is number one, but oh my gosh, I'm drawing a blank. The language that they speak in the Philippines was actually the second most spoken language in Calgary. So I actually decided not to have there's almost no text in the children's gallery, but maybe that would have been a way to do it. So it's really about asking the players, what game do they want to play?
Thank you, Evelyn. You kind of wound it around to the one thing that I feel will really stick with me from your talk today is that the design work is always in service to the visitors. And thank you for sharing today and inspiring and reminding us of the importance of play. And I know that people will look forward to getting your handout from the session today, and that will be an important resource. So thank you everyone for joining us today. Please be back next Wednesday, same time, same place, same channel for Emerging Digital Technologies, Endless Possibilities on a Budget. That will be presented by Raphael Baldwin from the New World Symphony. And as a reminder, of course, again, the registration will be free, but if you're able, please consider a donation and just hit the link in our chat for that. By the end of the week, you should have received a copy of Evelyn's presentation with the notes. And the email is also going to include a brief survey link. Please do fill that out. It helps us in meeting the needs of the sessions that will follow this. So stay safe, and we look forward to welcoming you again next week. Have a playful day. Bye, everybody.